teaching, or what they did that you sort of thought, that worked well, or that was, and when it's just rhetorical at the moment, Julie. So just take a minute just to think about, have you been through that process at all in yourself? Thinking about it. And again, it's that ability to direct your attention, isn't it? It's like I sit here and nothing comes to mind. Something happened yesterday. I did do a lesson. Or maybe you woke up all night. Absolutely. And did it lead to something that was helpful? Yeah. But again, it's that ability to direct our attention. What am I going to, when I'm in this fog, what do I do? Where do I start to be able to direct my attention? Or am I directing my attention in so many places, which is where I go in the middle of the night sometimes, that I can't even answer the question? Because, anyway, we'll talk about that later. So I just wanted to start this feedback session with, for me personally, I'm really interested in, as a community, not just in trainings, but how we as a Feldenkrais community, including all the practitioners in Australia, can make our ATM lessons more effective. I think it's really big questions. So this isn't just questions you're asking. This is questions we're asking as a community. What do we do to make ATM so that people really get a clearer understanding of why it might be valuable in their life to do awareness through movement? What's the relevance and meaning for them? And I think this is something that we can, as I said, as a community, put much more reflection into and action into. So just that this is a process that we as a community are going through, that we're going to be really happy for you all to be involved in, because it's often you, when you're just starting, that ask the best questions. Do you know what I mean? That when you come to the practitioners, the questions that you ask are sort of back here that we go, oh, we haven't thought about that for years. Do you know what I mean? Or it's no longer, it's become unconscious to it, or it's become this. So I'd really encourage you to get involved in your local communities if they, if they're doing anything on ATM or study groups, and really get involved and become part of that bigger question that we're all interested in. Anyway, so Lisa's got the box. No, what are your observations on just some things they can direct their attention to after observing them yesterday? No.
Sounds like it. Got it. I have thought about this, and I'm not too sure what to say now that it's at the point. Firstly, that mostly it was fantastic. Like, nobody went into meltdown. Nobody seemed overly stressed. The lessons were great. You had starts and middles and ends to them. You'd obviously thought about it and thought through, and what were you going to bring into the lessons. And of course, there's a big range. So I was just talking to Julie before about how some people need a lot of notes and things to refer to, and other people don't, and what's your process of figuring that out? And that's a big thing, I think, for a lot of you. and how much to verbally put into your lessons, and how much space to have, you know, this. So some people are great at directing attention, notice this, notice this, notice this. Sometimes it's very general, like just notice what's happening, and could be more detail. And other people, you know, I think their tendency is to leave space, and that's great. And sometimes it feels like too much space, and sometimes, so there's all of these little things just will come with practice and with figuring out what works for you and what works with the people in front of you, and being able to read and respond to the people who are in front of you. And mostly that was happening, that responding, which I think is one of the hardest things. It's not just I'm going to remember all the steps and tell all the things I want to tell, but to actually then be able to see, okay, and what's happening when I say that? How do I adjust? And a lot of the time, a lot of you would do it mostly. What else?
You might think of more things as we keep talking. Yeah.
Well, I was pretty impressed, but then again, that was what I expected of you. I've seen how you play. I've seen how you trust each other and take care of each other, and that was in evidence yesterday. It was great that you were able to say, this is what I want to practice today. And for a lot of you, it was, you know, getting your voice levels appropriate, and things like the timing and the tempo and the clarity of instructions. And they're fantastic starting places to say, this is what I want to concentrate on today. You know, I'll concentrate on something else next time. And I observed that you were able to give each other kind of feedback on the things that you'd asked for. So allowing yourself to take a learning opportunity as that, to practice something that you're choosing, is really valuable. Maybe once you get out in the world, you'll feel more in performance mode, but we're always learning. So it may be that even if you don't tell the class what you're practicing today, it might still be something that you keep in your pocket, and particularly look for clues as to what's coming back. Am I achieving what I intended in this particular aspect today? Or what could I do differently that would bring in that person without confusing that one? Because I think some of you discovered that more than one person at a time trebles the complexity. And of course, the more people we have in the room, the more that's likely to happen. But occasionally you'll get people working in groups and blocks, and there might be only a few choices to try and round up. So yeah, I really like that you were willing to kind of take a theme and play with that.
I really thought you all did a great job, really. This is your second practicum. You're only in the middle of second year. Yeah, I thought you really, really did well. The things that I liked, and I liked that you could all bring, and maybe that was just by giving you an outline of a lesson rather than someone else's transcript of a lesson, but I felt, and part of my thinking was that you could bring more your voice to the lesson, or you could begin to find what you thought was important in the lesson rather than relying on what someone else thought was important in the lesson. So I really enjoyed seeing that starting to emerge, that you bring your passion and curiosity, because that to me is the bottom line. You teach well when you're passionate about what you're teaching, you're interested in what you're teaching, and you're curious about what you're teaching. Yeah? If it's just something that you're going through the motions, you don't teach well. So I think many of you struggled with different things. So for some of you, it was more the movement side of it. Do you know what I mean? How much you actually understood of what the lesson was about in yourself. How much you understood of what this could evoke in someone's organisation. That's an ongoing project for all of us all the time. For some of you, it was in the learning. How many strategies do I give people to deal with in one lesson? And again, I suppose my reflection for you would be before you, and we'll do a little bit on this later, before you go in on Friday, which reminds me, how many people have we got for Friday?
We've got enough for everybody to have at least one extra and possibly two in some sessions.
Fantastic. Well,
but keep them coming.
Yeah, really, the more you get. It's a little bit, as I said, going back to that Maslow's unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, that you're already conscious and you're competent in ATM. Yeah, you're all, and there's different ATMs that you head backwards a little bit, but you've already got a lot of strategies, which is what you have to use to help you to facilitate learning. So one of the questions is, how do I find within the lesson I'm teaching, what are the one or two strategies that would really make a difference for people? Yeah? Rather than, you can still have the big picture, but when someone isn't used to doing Feldenkrais, and maybe many of these people already have done Feldenkrais, what are you going to direct their attention to? What is the thing that in the lesson you're teaching that would make a difference for them? That you can bring a little bit more foreground in your exploration. And again, I'm going big picture here because, as I said, I think you all did wonderfully. Your transitions, to think about at the end of the lesson especially, what is it that I want someone to take away from this lesson in terms of both the learning and the movement or the organisation? And again, it's a big question. It's going to take lots of approximations. But again, how do I bring meaning? And maybe, again, this is my bias because I know because we teach ATMs differently in trainings than we do in the general public. Yeah? So we're relying on trainings when we get you up at the end and we just say, go for a walk, and we might direct your attention a little bit. We're relying on you to make the connections yourself, to start to be building up some of those things in yourself. But just to be aware that many people will get up and you'll say, go for a walk. And they might feel something different, but is there any, and that might be enough for them, but it's not going to be enough for everyone. Yeah? To make any meaning or relevance of how they could use this in their life. So just to think a little bit about the ending of the lessons. I heard some lovely lessons where people were really doing an introduction to the Feldenkrais method at the beginning and saying, this is what the Feldenkrais method's about. And I always find that interesting when you hear it, because you get a pretty good indication of what people think, the person who's teaching, what they want to bring people's attention to. And I think it's wonderful to do that. I think when you really, just a quick thing, when you start getting into, don't use any effort, go slow, don't go into pain. I'm trying to think of some of the things that you'll say, really doesn't have a lot of meaning at the beginning of a lesson. So what is it that you want to get across at the beginning of the lesson, and then embed these other things when they're actually in movement, yeah? When they're actually in the process of the movement. Yeah? And again, different people brought different things. Again, there's something I think about, especially with people who haven't done much Feldenkrais. And, you know, Feldenkrais never did this. He does in the ATM book, but, you know, you don't see it in his workshops. Giving people an idea about what they're going to be exploring in the lesson. Doesn't have to be that important, but do you know what I mean? Giving them something to direct their attention at the beginning can be incredibly helpful for people, so that they're not just lying there thinking, what the hell is all this about? But that I'm giving you some sort of framework of what we're going to be doing here. And people did that in some beautiful ways that I heard yesterday. But again, it can be really helpful for people's learnings. So again, I'm putting this in context. I'm saying you're in the middle of second year. I'm not expecting you to be doing all of these things when you're teaching. Some of you are. But to keep that bigger picture in mind. And that's what I loved about Feldenkrais's teaching. He had this big picture and he'd come back to details. He would throw you in at the deep end. What are you going to do? You're going to sink or swim? But there's something about giving you a sense of all these components and not overwhelming you, but giving you ideas about where you could go. And that's what we're doing in our ATM teaching. Yeah, there's the big picture and there's the detail. Yeah. How are we sort of colouring all that in? And then I think the other major one that I would come back to is your self-use. Yeah. I spoke to some of you about this yesterday, but what is it? Because I know last time you did some stuff with Zoran on breathing and lifting. I think you were lifting a leg, paying attention. Lifting. You've probably done many things. So again, it's building relationships. What have you learned to observe in yourself that makes you know, first of all, that you're more comfortable? So what, I'm really interested, what does comfort mean? I know I asked this at the beginning, but how do you know that you're ready to teach? What are you looking for? Let's hear a few things. So would you reorganise yourselves at the moment if you were going to teach? Why would you do that? What are you paying attention to that you're going to reorganise yourself?
So for me, I realised during my lesson, without it being in my plan, that I talked a lot about breathing, you know, and it was obviously a note to self. You know, what comes out of my mouth is really about me. So I find that if I'm breathing with a bigger base of support in my pelvis or in this general area, I feel a lot more grounded and a lot more solid about what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So trying to breathe from, you know, well, everywhere, but really, you know, having that solidly kind of there.
What else could you relate that to, Gloria? So you've included two things, your breathing and that you feel more grounded in your base of support. What are some other things that you could associate that with that might be, because this is what we're asking people to do, to build relationships. And Gloria doesn't have to answer that question now, but what are some of the other things that you're looking for in yourselves that's telling you you're ready to teach? Anyone else got some ideas they want to share? Especially the people who just reorganised themselves to be a teacher. Why did you do that?
I was teaching yesterday. I had a few notes, but not in my hand. I didn't make a conscious decision to do this over the course. It was quite useful. I in and out, but I had my notes on the floor underneath there, and then I had nearby, and it was just interesting that there are a few times when I leant to grab pull my notes and that I could move around, and that was a reminder to me that I was comfortable and able and not stuck in one position.
I could move myself within my base of support with reversibility. So what's something else you could pay attention to? Yeah, Nina. These are the things you want your clients. This is the Feldenkrais method. Yeah?
Yesterday, we expected to have only 2 people, and the day before, I found a place where I will sit and teach. And because I had 3 students, and yeah, it was very nice, I had to organize myself in order to all of them hear me, and it was quite important. I moved all the time, and obviously it was a big change, and it was very convenient. I realized it's much better for me to move.
To be moving.
To moving, yeah, to be moving. Yeah, because in that case, my voice can access everyone, and also I have enough space in my body to have a stronger voice.
So there's some really interesting things there. I can move and have different perspectives. Yeah, is there something about if I know I get a bit stuck in this, that I know that if I move around, and what does that give the students lying or the people lying on the ground to hear my voice from different places? Does that change their perspective? Do they have to orient a little bit differently if I'm moving around the room rather than if I'm in one place all the time? Maybe that's going to change depending on the lesson you're teaching. Yeah. So the ability for you to move, to be able, it's much better than just staying in one place. Yeah. And I could see as you did it, that when you're sitting, so Nina, if we start her in sitting, how easy is it to shift your base of support? No, side, yeah, but yeah, to even come up, you can see the effort that she has to do. If you were just going to move a little bit side to side, yeah? So she's automatically widened her base of support. She's given herself some more options of movement. Yeah? Because now her neck's freer. Go back to when your knees were together. And is your neck? Yeah? So it's deeply investigating these habits that we have and what are the things we're looking for. Huh? Because this is what we're asking our clients to look for. Huh? So if you were going, and as Nina said, I think the big thing is her voice was different. And you have to keep remembering your voice is your self-use. This took me a long time to realise when I was listening to Feldenkrais a lot, that it was his self-use that was producing his voice, I mean, you know, basic, that enabled him to hold the room. It was his self-use. It was his solidity in his self-use. It was this when he really wanted to hold the room, and it was this when he wanted them to have a bit more space. And could you feel how that influences how I'm going to use my voice? So you're still at the beginning, but just to realise, just as in FI, self-use is the fundamental. So that then brings to mind, if I have a clearer sense of the lesson in myself, not a perfect sense, not all of it, but I've got some understanding of, is this about weight shift that I'm after here? Do you know what I mean? Is this a more global lesson? Is it that has to be in me when I'm teaching. Those components are what I'm looking for in my organisation when I'm teaching. And that's the lifetime journey of improving being a Feldenkrais practitioner. More and more understanding how I understand this work deeply in myself and how I bring that to someone else. So now that I've been on my little high horse there for a minute. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say it carries on a bit from what you were just saying. Smile, because that when you smile and even have a bit of a laugh, that affects your voice.
Absolutely,
It
because
loosens
what
you up a
happens
bit.
when you smile? You widen
And you breathe.
and you breathe
And you relax a bit.
and you soften a bit more to the ground.
And it's okay to make mistakes.
And you can make mistakes when you're in a place where you're more adaptable. That's the whole thing, isn't it? That's what we're trying to get people to sense, that if I'm not including more of myself in my image, if I'm in this habit, it's really difficult to make mistakes here because I want to be perfect. This is where I want to be perfect. And it's an organisation. It's a way of me being in the world. So how do we get people into this place of understanding that as they include more of themselves in their images, their attention can shift in more ways, it's so much easier to make mistakes.
There were two things from yesterday. One was I really appreciated sharing before the lesson what I wanted feedback on, because it sort of gave me permission to relax. I didn't have to think about it. They were going to tell me.
Fantastic.
And so that was really good. And as a result, the whole thing went a lot better. And the other thing is like sitting with a big base of support and being able to move. And through the lesson, I found, I was crossing my legs. I'm trying to wind my legs around. And every time I noticed that, just come back and everything changed. Internally, I had more space, I had more movement, and it was just really interesting to observe. Oh, why do I keep doing this? I don't have an answer, but yeah, they were the two things.
Great question to investigate, though. There's your habits in there.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
There's your habits.
Julie, did you want it? Oh, Julia.
I just, when you demonstrated 5 with her, for me, when you walk the space table, it was this fear about, I put a lot of attention because you create that space for me to listen, to be engaged without looking. The way that you look, the way that you walk, I think if we all get a little bit of, okay, something really interesting is going to happen now. And it was, something that stayed with me still.
And again, that's the movement. That's the ability to move attention in different ways. When am I more intentional? When am I more global? Do you know, when am I able to, because that's what you're learning, all these different ways to direct your own attention. And that they're different ways of being. You know, it's like when you get a little kid in who's all over the place, who can't settle, who can't move. And then at the same thing, and I'm talking kids because it's easier to relate to rather than what we all do as adults, then you get the child who can't move. How do they get global attention? Why do they sometimes get a bit fixated on things? You know, I've got a little girl I see who really can't move, and she is even still in the lesson where her mum has to read her a book. And it's just absolutely, mum has to read me a book while I'm doing this. And there's no point just saying, no, we're not going to read the book, because she just has a absolute meltdown. No? But what is it about being able to spread her attention in different ways, or being able to bring our attention back to being able to do this? And how do different lessons evoke all of this? Because, you know, this is where I'm talking about the learning part of it. Because we talk so blithely about directing attention. But do we realise that they're all different ways of organising ourselves?
One thing for me was more powerful, your action, rather than say, now we're going to come here, gathering around the table, we're going to demonstrate.
the way that you walk and the way that you action, you make into action, makes me feel engaged completely rather than say so many things. I felt already in, and that was the difference. It's just with one action, save a lot of energy as well.
It's that, my intention into action again, isn't it? That's what we're learning. I've got an intention, how do I put it into action? And then it's not working that well. What do I now explore to be able to do that more clearly or more easily? So big picture stuff. Philippa.
I've forgotten.
I know that feeling.
Well, it's related to the idea of comfort and pleasure, because and also being able to differentiate as the teacher. So in the lesson that I taught, there were different issues of comfort and pleasure within the students. So it also meant, even though one of the things I was interested in is differentiating within the lesson itself, what the problem came to be was, how do you differentiate between the people in the room when their issues of comfort and pleasure were completely at the opposite ends of the spectrum? So, I mean, I don't know the answer, but that became, because for comfort, there needs to be a level of pleasure. And discomfort is obviously the opposite. There was no pleasure, there was actually physical pain. So the idea of how do you then differentiate the instruction to bring about greater pleasure and at the same time bring about attention to changing the way in which the person who's experienced the pleasure and the comfort they go much faster, so you've got that, there's a tempo change, and the person is, they're joyful and gregarious and doing all of those things, and you've got the limp fish on the other end who just wants to die. They just want to lie down and die, it's like, get me out of here. So it was a real conundrum, because it meant that the lesson itself becomes superfluous to the comfort and pleasure of the student.
So that's what you're saying. The learning took over at that point. What's more important at this moment is that I'm going to get them to start to make some distinctions about comfort or pleasure, or is the learning that there's something in this movement that I think could be helpful.
And finding that place within the lesson to see that and change the intent.
And I think
of the
you're
lesson.
Asking a lot of yourself there, Philippa.
No, but I mean...
I'm asking... It's what I would say to you. No. What I would say to you is, this is the thing, say, if you're in FI or ATM, at the beginning, you're just trying to work out, these people I've got in front of me, what would be valuable for them to learn? What would be powerful? So what am I going to do in the next lesson is much more where I would be thinking of putting my attention. What have I learnt from watching these people in movement that then lets me know where I want to go next time? What would be powerful for these people to learn?
Well, it's also got to do with how, as a teacher, you begin to even notice that, because it creates a certain level of discomfort in yourself. It created a level of discomfort in myself, recognizing that I had to be able to split my attention. I had to split my attention in order to be able to look at the needs of two people in the class.
And I would suggest that it's something about your self-use. That it's something you do at that moment in time, that all of a sudden it's them or them. It's them or them. That I've lost a little bit of fluidity at that moment in being able to move from one to the other with reversibility. It's a suggestion. I'm not saying that's what you do, but I think this is where it can get really interesting, and that's why, even though I don't do this very much, it's wonderful to video yourself if you can bear the thing. And you know, I think the thing is just do it and do it again and do it again and do it again until you get over the discomfort. But I think they're the moments, because they're the moments that you can then go back and go, oh, look what I was doing there. What was I doing with myself at that moment? And I think I would also suggest, what are my expectations of myself? How much responsibility am I taking on for their learning? Which is another really big thing in anything. Yeah. So I think it was Julie, was it? Julie, you said at the beginning of your lesson, it was like, Julie's done some teaching before her. And, you know, you're responsible for your learning here. She was right up front from the beginning, you know, and that's going to mean different things for all of you, but that there was something there about this work is about you becoming responsible for your own learning, and that it's not good or bad, it's simply better. I'm looking to make something easier or a bit better, but it's not good or bad. Which one's a little easier? Which one just feels a bit better? And to remember that sometimes people can't make that distinction. So what are the distinctions? What could I draw their attention to that for both of them it could be make things interesting? But these are the things that make us think, Philippa. These are the questions that improve our teaching. If we didn't ask these questions, it would just become this. You know, so they're great observations. Okay, so could you get back into your little ATM groups with the 2 other people? And maybe just share your experience